Hello, and welcome to Chapter 8. Today, we'll be covering verbal communication. Within verbal communication, we'll be covering the definition of verbal communication, the functions of verbal communication, cooperative verbal communication, and barriers to cooperative communication. So, what is verbal communication? Verbal communication consists of spoken or written language with others during interaction. So think about that for a second. Do you consider texting someone verbal communication? Do you consider FaceTiming someone as verbal communication? Well, the next point solidifies my question, and we can verbally communicate face to face or through mediated contexts. Mediated contexts are, for example, cell phone usage, FaceTime, Zoom, or any other mediated context where you can see the others or talk over the other device with them. Communication is symbolic. Communication can tell using symbols to represent people, objects, events, and ideas. We use contextual clues for words with multiple meanings. For example, a teacher may say to you, let's hash this problem out, or let's work through this problem. Hash can signify let's cut this problem out, but in the context of a difficult problem that you are having on a test, or for example, a quiz or a homework problem, for example, your teacher is basically saying, oh, let's work through this problem, or let's figure out how we can solve this problem together. Language is governed by constitutive rules. Constitutive rules tells us which words represent which object. For example, cow refers to domestic bovines. Regulative rules govern how we verbally communicate with each other. They are the do's and don'ts. Regulates spelling, sentence structure, and conversation. For example, you wouldn't say cow the white is. Instead, you would say the cow is white, which we see the beautiful baby cow below. Language is flexible by using idioms. Idioms are words and phrases that can have unique meanings to them between communicators. For example, nicknames among romantic partners, friends, family members, or classmates. Language is cultural through dialectics. Dialects can include unique phrases, words, accents. Now think for a sec. Have you ever came in contact with someone who has a different accent than you? Did you automatically notice the difference between your accent and theirs? Dialects can be unique among region, ethnic group, and socioeconomic status. For example, many class Americans have their own unique dialect versus upper middle class Americans. We often compare ourselves to others with a similar accent, known as in-group members, against those who have a different accent, known as out-group members. Now, thinking about that point, have you ever pointed out the different accent from someone who, for example, is from New Jersey? versus someone who is from California? Or thinking more critically about that point, have you noticed or have you pointed out the difference between someone who is from a romantic or romance language versus someone who is from, let's just say, Japan or China? If you have, you were probably most likely comparing their accents, your accent, rep, your in-group accents against theirs, which are known as out-group accents. Again, just to solidify that point. Communication evolves over time. Constitutive words and technology changes the meanings of words. For example, people tweet watch to catch the latest celebrity scandal or gossip. What that means is they may go on Twitter, type in their favorite celebrity's name, and look at what other people have said about that person. Language borrows words from other languages. For example, Wisconsin, Muskegee, and Minnetonka are various Native American words for cities that had other original meanings. Regulative words also evolve over time. For example, using y'all or you all was once unacceptable, but now it is used to describe a group of people. Also, within that, we may have our own informal language versus formal language. Now, if you ever took a foreign language class in high school or in college, you may have been taught that there are formal words in that language and informal words in that particular language. And depending on if you're talking with an elder person or someone within your own age group, you may use different words with communicating with them. Next, we'll be covering the functions of verbal communication. It allows us to share meanings or meaning. This is done through denotative and connotative meaning. Denotative is the literal meaning of our words. They are shared within our culture. For example, he is known as the big bad wolf. These words are usually found in a dictionary. Wolf, for example, is found in the dictionary. And notice how the wolf is in shock that people are labeling him as the big bad wolf. Connotative meanings or words and is implied or suggestive, and we choose those words while communicating with each other. For example, you're the most beautiful jewel I know. That phrase or those verbs are properly used in close relationships. And if you look at the bottom, you will see Rose Quartz from Steven Universe accepting that someone thinks that she is the most beautiful jewel because she is. Communication shapes our thoughts. This is known as linguistic determinism. In the book, you will come across the sapphire hypothesis, which assumes that we cannot conceive for which we do not have vocabulary for. So I want you to take a second to think about that for a second. And think about a couple of words that we, if you trace back, that we borrowed from the Greek or Latin language. For example, hors d'oeuvres, which is literally translated from French outside the work, is usually labeled or given to finger food, whether it's served hot or cold. And if you think back to our earlier point, we borrow words from other languages to help us shape our communication for words that we can't or we can't, we don't have a meaning for at the time. Remember, again, that communication shapes over time or changes over time. So when we borrow words from other languages, we keep those words in our languages, in our language or culture, for example, and they are forever ingrained in our vocabulary. Linguistic relativity refers to how different cultures perceive and think about the world in different ways. When we give a person, place, object, and idea a name, we create symbols that represent them. Naming can have a positive and negative meaning. The functions of verbal communication allows us to take action through the use of speech acts. And speech acts can be enacted through granting requests, obeying commands, or declarations. Crafting conversations are interactive, involving two people, locally managed, who decides who gets to talk and for how long, universal, which is the foundation of interpersonal communication and maintained through conversation. And lastly, scripts, which are structured patterns that govern our communicative behaviors. Now, if you look on page 213 of your textbook um, at page 213 at figure 8.2, you will see an example of communication or a communicative pattern. Hi, how are you? My name is. Where are you from? Those are known as scripts. Taken together, how we craft our conversation can decrease uncertainty in budding or established relationships. This doesn't necessarily mean that once you get to know the person that uncertainty would not increase, but it is the foundation of getting to know someone. Or if you are in an established relationship, it is a way to maintain that relationship. Next, we will cover cooperative communication. When using cooperative communication, you speak where others can understand you and use I and we language. The cooperative principle involves making our conversations informative, honest, relevant, and clear. Now, think about that for a second. Whether you're talking with a family member or a teacher, when you perhaps could have a problem and you want a solution to that problem, you will most likely enact these principles, which are informative, letting the person who you're communicating with know what the problem is, being honest, providing relevant information, and being clear about the problem that is at hand so that the person you are communicating with can help you solve that problem. When interacting with someone, you will want to avoid you language, which is you make me so mad. This places blame on others. I language, I'm so upset, emphasizes ownership, opinions, and feelings. Our language alerts the listener that your opinions and beliefs are your own. So, for example, if someone did something to you, you would want to avoid, oh, you make me mad, or I, why did you do this to me? You would most likely say, I'm so upset, or I don't know what to do. Another form of cooperative communication is we language. which signifies inclusion. For example, this type of language implies sharing activities together. For example, we should go for a walk, we should go out to eat, or we should do our homework together. Or lastly, we should study for the test together. The last part of verbal communication that's being covered in this chapter is barriers to cooperative communication. A barrier to cooperative communication is verbal aggression, which is the tendency to attack others' self concept. Verbal aggressive behaviors can be shown as bullying someone through taunts and rude gestures. Now, think about that, for example. Have you ever bullied someone or have you seen someone bully someone? If you have, what did you do? How did that make you feel? If someone bullied you, how did that make you feel? Another form of a barrier to cooperative communication is deception, which occurs when one conveys inaccurate, untruthful, or vague information to mislead others. Individuals may become deceptive with the intent of hiding information from others. Deception is uncooperative and unethical because it takes away the recipient of the message from actually knowing who they are interacting with. Now, think about that point for a minute. Have you ever withheld information from someone because you felt like you didn't want to hurt their feelings? Or you withheld the information because it could have made you look bad in front of the person? Do you consider that deceptive information? Do you consider that deceptive behavior? In any case, withholding information from anyone that it can lead to vague information or concealing information from someone is known as deception. Barriers to cooperative communication can lead to defensive communication. This is impolite messages in response to criticism, suggestions, or perceived slights. There are four types of defensive messages, which are dogmatic, for example, why would I change my opinion? Superiority, for example, I have more experience and I know what I am doing. Indifference, does this supposed to make me laugh? And control, I'm done talking about this problem with you. Leave me alone. Another form, or a last form of a barrier to cooperative communication, is communication apprehension, which is fear or anxiety in communicating with others. This uh, could come from being scared to speak in front of others in a large crowd, or asking someone to go on a date, or this fear or anxiety could come from the belief that you don't know what to say or how people will respond to you if you were to say something. However, communication plans or mental roadmaps can be used to overcome potential difficult interactions with others. For example, this can this communication plan can happen before you interact with someone or during the communication interaction with someone. Thinking closely about what next to say and taking your time in thinking about what next to say. This is the end of this chapter, and believe you can do it. I believe that you can do it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this chapter.